If this episode makes you think, please let us know in the comments and support us by subscribing and leaving a review. Thank you. Today we are exploring the AI impact on assessment in New South Wales, where half of a student's higher school certificate result comes from school-based assessment, including work that may be completed at home. On 10th of August 2026, the Minns government published a ministerial media release titled Minns Government Examines Measures to Halt AI's Impact on Cognitive Development of a Generation of NSW students. Deputy Premier and Minister for Education and Early Learning Prue Car has asked the NSW Education Standards Authority to urgently review AI and student learning, with interim changes potentially arriving by the beginning of Term 4. The immediate proposal is a possible moratorium on unsupervised take-home assessment while that wider review takes place. That could shape the HSC AI policy faced by the class of 2027. My first reaction is that the concern is legitimate. If a student submits a polished essay, design rationale, or research report produced largely by artificial intelligence, the mark may tell us very little about what that student knows. The certificate starts measuring access to a tool and skill in managing it rather than the intended knowledge and thinking. But we need to be precise about the evidence. This is a government media release, so it announces a policy direction and makes the case for action. It isn't a research paper. The release refers to growing evidence about AI's effect on cognitive development, but it doesn't name studies, quantify the effect, or separate occasional support from sustained dependence. Those distinctions matter. Using artificial intelligence to generate an entire response isn't the same as asking it to challenge an argument, explain feedback, or produce practice questions. One may bypass thinking. Another may provoke it. If policy treats every interaction as cognitively harmful, it will miss that difference. I do agree strongly with Prue Car's underlying point. Education is about building knowledge, judgment, resilience, and critical thinking over time. When students repeatedly outsource that work, they can accumulate what I'd call cognitive debt. The assignment gets finished today, but the capability needed tomorrow hasn't been built. Think about a Year 8 geography lesson. A student can ask a chatbot to write a convincing explanation of coastal erosion. Yet if that student can't interpret a local photograph, connect it to wave action, and defend which protection strategy suits that coastline, the polished paragraph has concealed a gap. The real value is not in what the machine produces, but in how the student responds. That brings us to the proposed moratorium. It offers a simple answer to a difficult verification problem. Bring more assessment into supervised settings. For the higher school certificate, or HSC, that may restore confidence that submitted work belongs to the student. Parents and universities need that confidence. Still, removing unsupervised take-home tasks creates trade-offs. Some worthwhile work needs time, iteration, and access to materials that a timed classroom can't provide. The release recognizes this by suggesting exemptions for major art and design and technology projects. Once those exemptions begin, subject-specific judgment becomes crucial. A blanket rule quickly meets the reality of different disciplines. There's an equity issue as well. Take-home assessment can disadvantage students who lack a quiet room, reliable internet, or family support. Supervised assessment may reduce that gap, yet concentrating more tasks inside school could disadvantage students who need additional processing time, experience assessment anxiety, or depend on carefully designed adjustments. A fairer location doesn't automatically produce a fairer assessment. If you value this kind of practical analysis of AI in education, follow or subscribe to the podcast for future episodes. The stronger long-term response, in my view, is assessment redesign rather than permanent retreat. We can look at 3 sources of evidence: the product a student submits, the process used to create it, and a live performance showing what the student understands. Suppose an HSC student completes a major investigation. The finished report remains useful, but the teacher might also examine planning notes, drafts, source decisions, and declared AI interactions. Then the student could complete a short oral defense or apply the argument to unfamiliar evidence. No single element proves authorship perfectly. Together, they create a much richer picture of learning and make authentic student work easier to recognize. This approach also avoids turning teachers into digital detectives. The NSW Education Standards Authority, commonly known as NESA, has been asked to develop a common approach for identifying inappropriate AI use. That wording deserves close attention. If it leads schools towards automated AI detection tools, I'd be deeply concerned. Those systems are unreliable, and a probability score isn't sound evidence of misconduct. A common approach should instead describe a fair professional process. Look at version history. Compare the submission with known classroom work. Ask the student to explain particular choices. Give them an opportunity to demonstrate understanding. Record the evidence and apply consistent appeal procedures. Human judgment must remain central because the consequences for a student can be substantial. There's also a workload question hidden inside this announcement. More supervised tasks need rooms, timetable space, and staff. Oral defences take time. Process evidence must be reviewed. Schools will need exemplars, moderation, and professional development before Term 4, especially if advice is expected to shape the class of 2027. A sensible announcement can fail if implementation is treated as a memo rather than a funded change. Department heads planning professional development shouldn't begin with a tour of AI tools. They could bring one existing assessment, identify what it claims to measure, and ask whether artificial intelligence can complete it without the student's unique context or judgment. Then redesign one vulnerable section. Small discipline changes will teach us more than sweeping declarations. At system level, NESA will need enough flexibility for English, visual arts, science, and design subjects to protect different forms of learning while maintaining comparable standards. Schools also need clarity on permitted support. Can students use artificial intelligence for brainstorming, language feedback, or accessibility? Must every use be declared? What evidence should teachers retain? Ambiguity will produce inconsistent enforcement. For government, the difficult balance is speed against certainty. The Min's government wants safeguards while evidence develops, and I understand that instinct. Waiting several years would leave schools managing the problem alone. But the phrase, "halt AI's impact on cognitive development," reaches further than the evidence presented in the release. Policy should target the bypassing of learning rather than implying that the technology has one uniform effect. AI in NSW schools will require boundaries, but also a clearer account of productive use. Students need to learn when assistance strengthens thought and when it replaces the productive struggle through which capability grows. That is teaching students not to outsmart machines, but to outthink them. The AI impact on assessment won't be solved by moving every task into a supervised room. It will be addressed when assessment makes thinking visible, values process as well as product, and asks students to stand behind their work. Authentic assessment isn't work completed without technology. It's work the student can explain, defend, and extend. That's all for today. Thanks for listening.